Hi, I'm Russ Mundy from Parsons, and I worked for a number of years on the DNSSEC Deployment Initiative project from DHS, and they asked me to say a few words as a mature program about the transition and answer some of the questions. So I'll read through the question set they provided and then give you my view. What does transition mean to you, and what does it mean to transition technology? Well, to me, transitioning of things of this nature means getting it from the research, creative, coming up with the idea, proving the idea world, into the real functioning operational world. That is, to me, the most important part, is to have it actually put to use in the way, or at least close to the way, that it was created to be put to use to begin with. The next question they wanted me to talk about was, what makes research transition challenging? Well, one of the biggest things that I've seen over the life of this project and a number of other projects that we've been involved with is that many, many times the actual operational world has no particular interest in the technology that's being researched, and they are reluctant to provide any input and guidance as to what they need that's related to the research you're conducting. And in fact, at times, the functioning operational community is opposed to the set of things that you're trying to do. So there is sometimes active resistance, and that is one of the probably the biggest single challenge in getting technology from the research world into the actual operational world. Then the next question is, what are the differences between transitioning to government versus private industry? In my view, I think the biggest difference is that in a government type of environment, there is sometimes a stronger set of defined needs that research can be pointed at meeting, and there are actual acquisition vehicles run by the government to buy the technology and put it into use. And so there is both policy and financial incentives, where in private industry, it's much more challenging because you need to show not only some type of business case, some type of why is it beneficial for me in my industry to do this, and they are less likely to spend money on forward-thinking, forward-looking technologies than the government is. So the next question, how do you transition technology? Boy, this is a broad question. Transitioning technology, I think, depends a lot on what it is, the technology that you're dealing with. And so if you're dealing with technology related to the internet infrastructure, which is primarily what I and my group of folks do focus on, is technology that relates to improving the reliability and security of the internet infrastructure. That type of technology, you have to deal with the entire internet, and at least the important parts of the infrastructure related internet. In the case of DNSSEC, the DNSSEC Deployment Initiative, well, almost every entity on the internet makes use of DNS, and we started out the program saying we want every DNS query and every DNS response to have the security technology in it as the measure, if you will, of success of where we want to get to with that program. Even now, as a mature and I think very effective program, it is nowhere close to that degree of breadth in use. So technology transition can have a huge spectrum. When the DNS root zone was signed with DNSSEC technology, that was a huge step forward. When a number of the top-level domains, including the .com domain, was signed, the fact that the largest single top-level domain was signed was an important technology transition, and it has been running operationally for nearly 5 years now. So That, for the technology we deal in, is a good measure of what it means. What it means for different technology projects, I think, has to be judged based on each individual technology project and what's trying to be achieved. Okay, what advice would you give to researchers regarding technology transition? Well, I think my advice would be to make sure you have the best understanding you can get of what the intended operational use of the technology will be or should be. And that can be involving sometimes changing how operations work. Sometimes it involves a very close, tight coupling of technology additions to existing operations and not making any substantial changes in the operational environment. But I think that's probably the most important thing I would commend researchers to, is to understand the operational environment that you are hoping to impact, and so that from the beginning you have an idea of where you're trying to get to at the end from the operational environment. Next question. What advice would you give the government regarding technology transition? I think the most important thing is, for things that are successful, don't quit. Don't give up, because initial successes are very good indicators and very good things to point at. But many, many times, in fact, I would say the vast majority of the times, the government gives up on pushing and motivating the incorporation of new technology on a broad spread basis. And at times, the technology itself may wither and die because it doesn't have enough support. Next question. How successful is the cybersecurity research community in general at technology, at transitioning technology? Personally, I think it's pretty poor on the broad sense. One of the best examples of that is the fact that there's such a huge amount of email out there in the internet that's not encrypted, and there's been various approaches and various attempts to try to get email encrypted for many years. Hasn't happened. IPsec as a technology is superb, and it's out there in use in some specialized environments, but in other areas it's just simply not used where it could be used. The DNS security, DNSSEC, and the associated DANE technology with it is beginning to move now, but there's still a very long ways for it to go before it is broadly successful. And so in general, I think the research community has not been real effective at transitioning their technology. And in some ways, this goes back to the question of what can the government do to make the transition better. And the response I have for that is continue to push it, continue to facilitate and support it. Now, the next question. What have government agencies done to help with transition? What can government agencies do to help with transition? Well, I think, it depends on the technology. In the case of the DNSSEC deployment initiative, we had a great deal of help from incorporation of the requirement to do DNSSEC into the FISMA requirements. And so these are what government activities have to do to meet their policy requirements, and the government process by which they cranked up, if you will, to higher levels, the need on a policy basis to get your security approval by making use of DNSSEC was very effective. That's, in my recollection, the most effective activity that the government can do in terms of transitioning from research to reality. The other thing that I've seen happen that has had mixed success, and that's through the acquisition chain itself rather than through the security policy chain of FISMA. through the acquisition chain to direct that technologies be acquired, and then through the security chain direct that they be used in government functions and facilities that relate to these technologies. Now, the last question, what most contributed to the successful transitions you've had? What got you over the hump? Well, for DNSSEC deployment initiative, the biggest single event that got us over the hump was recognition by the broad internet community that there was a serious threat associated with having DNS running and doing the many things that are still currently being done without DNSSEC as part of it, where another researcher involved in research related to DNS and how security weaknesses can be exploited demonstrated that you could take advantage of the design weaknesses that are part of the original older DNS design and exploit those in a matter of minutes. And it was very effectively publicized, and that really made a big difference in the interest level of those in the operational community that were not previously thinking this was a real risk that they were worried about. So that single event was probably the biggest thing that helped push DNSSEC over the hump. The next biggest set of events would be the incorporation of DNSSEC technology into the root of the DNS and the major top-level domains in the DNS. Well, thank you. I appreciate the chance to give you my views on this, and I hope to see folks associated with this soon. Thank you. Bye.